Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Buckeye Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Chad Stryker. Thanks for spending some time today with us. I appreciate it. I am going to be diving into a few things. The first being, I call this Q&A Tuesday for a reason. I'll be answering some of your questions that were submitted on our YouTube and on our website, and I appreciate those. I love answering your questions. I think that's great. It helps me know what you would like to hear about. So thanks for submitting those. If you could take a few minutes or a few seconds, I guess, and hit that like button, helps with the algorithm with YouTube. I mentioned it in my last podcast. I am seeing an uptick, which is great. So thank you so much for liking and subscribing. I do this, out of fun, but it is nice to know that people are listening and enjoy the content. So thank you for that. We are going to be looking at a few things, like I mentioned. But firstly, I want to kind of give you an update on where we are in the season and what's happening in the spring. So, it's 7 days until spring practice, so we're not counting weeks now, we're counting days. So the first practice will be March 7th, the second practice will be March 9th. Then Ohio State as a school will go on spring break for 7 or 8 days, and they'll come back, and then the team will be practicing 3 times a week right up until the spring game, which is April 15th. So lots going on. They're finishing up winter conditioning, getting ready for those practices, and then it'll be after April 15th. The Indiana game will be on September 2nd, so we'll have summer and fall camp. Um, so we'll be paying attention to that. So, like I said, I call this Q&A Tuesday for a reason. I have a few mailbag questions I've been just kind of like piling up, I guess, as we've gone through the state of the position for the different positions on both the offensive and defensive line. But so I'll dive into a few of these today. Question one was, where am I located? So I'm located near Orrville, Ohio. They're famous for Smucker's Jelly. The Smucker corporate office is headquartered here. I am about an hour and 20 minutes from Columbus, which is why I say at the start of a lot of my shows, like I'm not in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. I base a lot of this stuff off what I see, what I believe, and just listening and reading a lot. So hopefully that helps. How often do I load content? So thanks, Newy Gamer, for the question. I do 2 shows per week. I work a full-time job, 8 to 5, in a completely different industry. Plus, I'm a husband and a father, and I have 2 kiddos. And so pulling together content right now is time-consuming. It really only allows for 2 shows a week. Much more of that would eat way too much up into my family time, etc. So, 2 shows for right now. As I venture into this podcasting and video casting world. Um, Question three: how do I get my information? So I can kind of understand this question. It's multi-pronged. I read and listen to a lot of Buckeye football content. I think I watch 4 or 5 different other, or listen to 4 or 5 different other podcasts that of people that are that report and are at the Woody or whatever. I probably follow 25 different beat reporters on Twitter. The rest is just based on my years of experience watching football, watching players, and then just telling you what I believe. So, I don't. There's nothing. I don't have any inside sources or anything like that. I just, I've watched a lot of football, and I try to understand what the team is trying to do and what they're trying to get done, and who I think would best fit that scheme or that item or that issue. So, do I have a press pass? No, no, I do not. I'm my own entity. I do not work for an organization with press passes. Would I love to do that, or be down on the sideline and be reporting? Absolutely, I think that would be fantastic. But it's not my full time job, not what I do. This is just something I do for fun. So, but appreciate the question. Understand where that comes from. Why am I so adamant about NIL and the foundation and the O Foundation? So I'm gonna dodge that question right now, just until Friday. I will just say I like winning, and leave it at that. And I will full on answer your question on Friday. So hopefully, you'll be okay with you'll be okay with waiting. The guy's name was Jim that asked me that. So lastly, I didn't give a grade last week for the cornerbacks on Friday. I really wanted to think about it. I did a lot of research into the position and like what was going on, and kind of thinking about last year and the year before, and some of the BIA teams that we had. And I'm gonna give them a C for what's in the room right now, and that's based on talent. Until they prove it on the field, I'm not changing that. I'm going with a C. I really debated about that because if you'd asked me at the end of last year, I'd probably given them like a D minus. So, but based off this year's team, this year's players, and what I believe will happen, give them a C. So, without any further delay, the state of the offensive line position. So let me remind everybody, just in case you forgot, leaving for the NFL draft, we have Paris Johnson Jr., DeJuan Jones, and Luke Whippler. So our starting left tackle, our starting right tackle, and our starting center are all off to the NFL. Our returning starters at left guard are Donovan Jackson, and at right guard, Matthew Jones. And if you count Josh Fryer, he was the jumbo lineman. He also was the first man kind of off the bench last year. He was the sixth man on that offensive line. Josh Fryer is back. So that is where we are. I would like to say that the offensive line is a position group I'm worried about right now. A lot of unknowns, and anytime you have unknowns or change, it can be concerning for anybody, no matter what you do, where you work, or what's going on. So, left tackle, I'm going to start there. I expect Josh Fryer to get every opportunity in the spring to win this job and prove he can own it and anchor it on that side of on the left side of the offensive line. I also expect Zen Michalski to get some reps at left tackle. If you forgot, Michalski was a class of 2022 four-star kid out of Indiana. He was the number 4 player in the state of Indiana and a top 20 tackle in the class. So he's no slouch. He's just a young kid, So got to gain some weight, got to gain some muscle, got to gain some experience. I like either of them to work on that position and get the first reps at that position. Something of a trend that I'm noticing with kids from the 2020 class is, this is going to come into play here in a little bit, is the COVID season really stunted some growth. And some of these kids that you may see burst on the scene this year as like redshirt sophomores or juniors will be because of that. Not to mention we played 4 tackles in the 2021 season to keep the most talent on the field. So what I think comes of whoever wins the left tackle job, the opposite person who didn't win that job technically will probably start at right tackle. That's just me looking at it from my point of view. Now, if no one wins it, then I'd say we can start looking at the transfer portal. I think those are probably our top 2 contenders. I don't see Vic Cutler that they brought in the transfer portal being a viable option in the Big Ten at tackle. Just kind of where I see this. So as I mentioned, I think Josh Fryer probably starts at left tackle and Michalski will be at right tackle. But on the flip side, if you were asking me and I could design the perfect scenario here, I think Josh Fryer is a natural fit at right tackle, and he has a rapport with Matthew Jones. He has familiarity there, but that leaves the left tackle position kind of open. So whatever it's best, whatever works best for the team, great. I'm just going to say right now, I think it's Michalski and Fryer and then a whole bunch of unknown stuff for right now. Left guard, clearly Donovan Jackson. I know some people have said, well, move him out to tackle, and I do not think he is long enough to play tackle. He may be nimble enough, but I think keeping him at guard is the right move, and keeping that that structure there, especially you're going to have a new starting center, so having your two guards, is a bonus. Where things get a little dicey is if we would have an injury. Based off what I can see on the depth chart, you kind of have Inak Vamahi, Tegra Shabola, and Toby Wilson, even though he could be a center, but I believe he could play guard. So, and then you obviously have Vic Cutler, guard center. So a lot of these, pieces can move back and forth, and so there's a lot of, I guess, juxtaposition here. It just depends on who lands where. So, next at center, I feel like I'm the only person on the planet, and maybe not. Maybe others are starting to talk about it. I think yesterday Dave Biddle mentioned this on Bucknut's podcast. I think Carson Hinsman could truly win the center job. Hinsman came in as a high 4-star, the number 3 player in Wisconsin, number 9 overall offensive lineman in the 2022 class. Last year he was probably a little small. He's going to have two seasons under his belt, or 2 conditionings under his belt. He turned down Wisconsin, so he had an offer to Wisconsin, which we know what kind of offensive lineman they put out to come to OSU. He has experience at every position on the line, but he really projects as a guard or center in college, and so don't be shocked if you hear that name. No slight to Vic Cutler or Jacob James. Maybe Vic Cutler, because of the experience that he had at University of Louisiana Monroe. Maybe that helps him. Maybe since he's here this winter, he'll get, a feel for what's going on, and it's a non-topic. But pay attention to Carson Hinsman. Jacob James is a junior, so he was kind of the backup for Whippler last year. He's out of Cincinnati Elder. He was actually a tackle in high school, mostly tackle guard. And he came in as part of that COVID class in 2020. So remember, I mentioned I think you may see some of those guys really take the next step. And I really think that year it hurt some players. And so especially offensive linemen, usually you need a year or 2 in the system. A lot of them redshirt. There aren't many that don't. There are very few that don't. And there are very few that are like 3 and done as well. Usually they're 4 and done because of the redshirt year. So that said, Jacob James could burst on the scene too. So there's a lot of mystery here. But if you held me down today and I was going to say who do I think is going to start, I think it's going to be Carson Hinsman. We'll start at center. Just my take. So lastly, I'll say, on the center position, we have to get it right, because there's a lot changing like in the middle there, because you're going to have a different quarterback, a different center. So there has to be a connection there. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, we'll see how spring practice goes and what it looks like. So at right guard, Matthew Jones returning for his 6th year. Big deal. It's a really big deal. I know there's a lot of speculation that he might slide over to center, which could still happen. It could still happen. And then you have Vic Cutler or Carson Hinsman play right guard. There's so many moving pieces here. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, Matthew Jones doesn't have to wear his clown shoe this year, and his foot is healed, his ankle is healed. I really can't stress enough how big of a return Matthew Jones was once Luke Whippler declared. Because if you only return one starting offensive lineman, I think they would have been far more aggressive in the transfer portal than they were. At right tackle, I mentioned I think it's either Fryer or Mahalski, but this is a giant but. I'm just going to throw this out there because I put it in my show notes. If Luke Montgomery would come in ready to go, which very rarely happens, I think Paris Johnson Jr., Orlando Pace, maybe Michael Jordan, might be the only three that I can think of in recent memory linemen that they plugged in immediately. Um, could happen. I'll just say it like that. He could play right tackle. Now, with that said, and things being a little uncertain, I wouldn't be shocked if the Buckeyes go into the transfer portal in May and grab a tackle, maybe even just for depth, and another interior piece for depth, and go into the year with, maybe, um, you know, 12, 14 guys. We'll see. My final thought. Uh, Coach Fry has his work cut out for him. I know I said Perry Eliano and the defensive backs have their cut, have their time cut out for them this year, and they're really going to have to prove it, and have their work cut out for them. But Coach Fry, I think, has the biggest job because um, hopefully he had some time to develop these guys last year as they were sitting behind Johnson and Whippler and DeJuan Jones, but these young guys need to take the next step. This is where you prove it. This is where you prove you're worth that money as an assistant coach. Time will tell. I think last year was kind of a picnic because he knew what he had, and so we're going to have to get these guys up and ready and Big Ten ready. If not, if we can't keep the quarterbacks upright and our running backs headed downhill, not going to be a good year. It all starts in the middle. And if you guys look at the last couple of years, the reason we've lost to Michigan is because we've lost the defensive and offensive line play. Whenever we beat Michigan, it's won in the trenches. So take that with you as you leave. Lastly, I'll give this group a C plus B minus grade. They have some talent, they have some returning starters, but they'll have to prove it in October and November this fall. I think at the end of the year I'll revisit these grades and maybe I'll be right and maybe I'll be wrong, but that's where I'm at. So that's it. That's all, folks, for the position groups. Don't forget to hit me up with your mailbag questions on my website, or any comments below on the YouTube. That's great. On Friday, I'll be doing a quick look at the fall schedule, and I'll be doing the answer to that mailbag question about the why I'm so passionate about NIL right now. So we'll do the fall schedule. I'll do a prediction for the Buckeyes record. I'll talk a little bit about NIL. And next week, we'll have actual practice to talk about, which is awesome. So until Friday, you guys have a great week. Thanks for listening. See ya. Go Bucks.